else was willing to become my friend. This stigma against me never left and eventually ended up driving me out of my home school district of Kimberly. 6th grade through 8th grade, I could not make any friends, was purposefully ignored and ostracized by others, including teachers and staff, and picked on in the subtlest ways that I could never really prove to anyone. When I finally had enough of Suwako, I moved on to a boy at my school who I'll call Trey. Things started out okay when we saw each other at school, but quickly became rotten during summer vacation when we communicated through Skype, and he was hidden behind a screen. This relationship again became sexually and emotionally abusive. I stuck with it though for a year and some change until I found someone better. I'll call him Raymond. He was in a Skype group chat I had been added to and lived in Toronto. He was absolutely the sweetest, kindest, most adorable human being I've ever met. That's how he drew me in. I left Trey for someone who I believed would treat me better. There's no way I would have believed that someone as sweet as Raymond could have ended up the way he did. But within a month's time, at the age of 13, I was suffering so much I self-harmed for the first time. As it turned out, Raymond had a horrible inferiority complex, and rather than discussing this and getting help, he dealt with it by dragging others down to make himself seem superior. A few months into our online relationship, Raymond decided he was no longer a boy and became known as Tracy. For the next 10 years, we spent nearly all our time arguing with each other, crying, having panic attacks. She used fake suicide attempts and threats, crying fits, panic attacks, and self-harm to get me to give her what she wanted, constantly putting me and my interests down, making fun of my physical appearance, purposely saying things to make me jealous or upset, and threatening to physically harm me. On top of all of this, she spread lies about me and my relationship. This relationship lasted close to exactly a year. During my relationship with Tracy, my real social life was close to non-existent. Because of this, I spent a lot of time on the internet, trying to desperately make friends there. This led me to start using Tumblr. While Tumblr has definitely contributed to my life in positive ways, namely getting me introduced to basic mental illness and the warning signs of depression and anxiety that led to my diagnosis, it also did a good job trapping me in the toxic mindset many users possess. The slang term, social justice warrior, dates to the early 2010s and describes Tumblr users who appropriate minority identities while claiming to be them and defend them. Typical behavior shows social justice warriors to present themselves as LGBT+ in some form, often having made-up sexual identities, usually claiming to be transgender, most often non-binary, having made-up the same one, being otherkin, defined as a person who identifies partially or wholly non-human, and faking mental illnesses to gain attention and sympathy from others. Yes, there really are people like this. Tumblr was a place where you could be literally whatever you wanted, with little to no judgment, as long as you were transgender and defended minority groups. Thus, isolated from any acceptance in real life, LGBT+, and mentally ill with a background of abuse, I decided to fully take on the role of a typical Tumblr social justice warrior. To my knowledge, I can remember identifying as gender fluid, a trans boy, a demi-girl, and agender. I can think of at least 6 different trans names I went by, all while visually presenting similar to how I present now, in skirts, long hair, and makeup. Here is an incomplete list of 17 fictional characters I identified as well as a list of, coincidentally, 17 misdiagnoses I made about my mental health in an attempt to figure out what was happening to me. My time on Tumblr was mainly spent sucking up to everyone, yelling at cisgender, or as we learned during Mia's panel yesterday, non-transgender people, which is 99% of the population, for being inherently transphobic, calling out racism and ableism on the simplest things. In short, from age 13 to 15, I whined and complained about how I'm allowed to be a general moron to people due to mental illnesses I did not actually have. What finally snapped me out of this phase was switching from Kimberly's traditional middle school to Kimberly's project-based charter school, and seeing that people still did not like me. I thought that ultimately, people disliked me because of things out of my control that had happened in the past. And while in theory I was probably right and things should have been better for me, I had turned into a complete idiot, making people who I didn't even know hate me. I graduated 9th grade, despised by my peers for throwing random, unwarranted hissy fits over nothing, somehow stirring up drama, policing everything people said, and in general being an unpleasant person to be around. I was lucky enough to have the gift to realize over the summer But if I really wanted to become happier, I had to stop wrapping myself up in my faults and blaming others for them. I became inactive on Tumblr and began to be conscious of my own personality and attempt to finally enable social success for my fresh start at Valley New School. Luckily, I was able to pull it together. With symptoms of depression, anxiety, PTSD, and various personality disorders, I saw multiple therapists, was on multiple medications, and was even hospitalized. But I started to take responsibility and move forward. I chose to focus my final year at Valley New School on finding ways to build myself back up and recover from the trauma and the horrible effects it had on my personality and health in order to be successful and independent. The initial goal for this project was to completely prepare myself for the future, and while I do consider myself ready to move on, I have learned that there may also be things I need to work on, things I will be insecure about, or things I will need to improve. And that's definitely okay. I have big dreams for my future. Despite the fact that I've attended project-based schools for my entire high school education, I still have not found my passion. Each project I did had little to no correlation, from jellyfish to mineralogy to astrology to child sexual abuse. Some people know their passions from day one, but I never really had one. This leaves me to be fairly apathetic about my career path. However, I still possess two strong drives. The first is to get out of Wisconsin. To be completely frank, I hate it here, and I'm not just talking about the weather and construction. I'm not sure what others are like in other states, but I find the personality of the average Wisconsinite to be boorish, overly self-confident, assertive, and competitive. Perhaps the exact opposite of what I describe myself as. On top of that, the state has no real attractions that stick out to me other than sports and beer, both of which I dislike. People have been telling me since I was a kid that I'll change my mind, that it's my home state and I'll come to love it, but I've never seen any benefit to being here. No matter what it takes, I will leave this state. Where I would rather go instead leads us into my next drive, the drive for success. And for me, success means being able to have a healthy, loving relationship. In June 2016, my family took a trip to the UK. Since we were so far away from home, and I thought I'd probably never be in the UK again, I decided to take the chance to meet someone before I could have any room to regret it later. I chose a person who I met on DeviantArt under the name Gerald T. Xenomorph. Gerald T. Xenomorph. This person generally talked in complete nonsense. His sentences were chock full of references to shows or games I did not understand, but he seemed genuinely like a good person. I had only interacted with this person for 6 or 7 months through the comment section on the website. I didn't know their real name or age, and I hadn't seen their face. Yet I still decided to make plans to meet this person. I swear I'm not crazy. Turns out, I super lucked out with this. A few days before we met in person, he finally sent a picture of himself to me. This was the picture he sent me. Upon seeing this, my attitude towards the situation went from casual meetup with a decent person to, oh my god, why is someone so adorable talking to me? It's fairly easy to say that I developed an instant crush on him. As planned, we met up at his favorite hangout spot and went out to eat together. I learned that his name was Felix and that he was a year younger than me. He was slightly awkward in the most charming way, very thoughtful with his words, had the most creative mind, a playful sense of humor, and was vaguely affectionate. The day we met was the last day in London. I would depart for America the next morning. I had only spent a day with him, but I spent that night crying, because even if it was a few hours, I knew that I wanted more of this person in my life, and I wasn't sure if I was ever going to get that. 2 months later, however, we met up again in Chicago while his family was on vacation. We've been in a relationship ever since, nearly 2 years by now. I believe that my experiences as a child has made building a close relationship with someone who I love my top priority. I want to be happy and share that happiness with someone who I adore, and thus my senior project was born, preparing for the future, Xanaism in a foreign country. I spent this year focused on preparing myself for a fresh start in a new place with new people to live out the dream that I hold. In a way, my senior project is more or less just an extension of my junior project. I was well aware that I needed a lot of extra time to learn and figure out how to get to and attend college in the UK. I already had a few colleges I was interested in for my junior project, so that was a start. My first choice was University of West London. It was a medium-sized college, received a silver award from London's TEF, a university ranking system, had high student satisfaction, and nearly all graduated students went on to work. My next choice was Goldsmiths, University of London. Goldsmiths is a somewhat prestigious university specializing in arts and humanities. Goldsmiths is a bit smaller than the University of West London, received a bronze award from the TEF, slightly lower satisfaction than the University of West London, and similarly, most graduated students went on to work. My final main choice was University of Greenwich, a somewhat larger school with a silver award from the TEF with the same level of student satisfaction and numbers of students who went on to work as University of Goldsmiths. I had saved up a lot of money for my co-op position, and because of this, my parents allowed me to take another trip to London during summer 2017. I then contacted the colleges for tours, my first real step in my senior project. Both Greenwich and West London contacted me back to arrange a visit, and soon enough the dates were set. My dad and I left for London on August 1st, 2017, and arrived on the 2nd. My plan was to stay in a hotel for a week, then have Dad leave for home, and the next week would be spent at Felix's house. Because Dad had to leave so early, my college visits happened pretty quickly after arriving. We went to University of West London first. The campus was very impressive. We talked to an international student representative and had her answer a few questions. My dad seemed super into the school, and I liked it as well, although this must have not been too apparent to Dad, who described me as poker face the entire time. I guess I didn't really know what to expect out of a college yet. The next day, we were scheduled to go to University of Greenwich. We left for the school half an hour earlier than our scheduled departure time, yet still ended up late due to how large and difficult to navigate the campus was. We missed our appointment, but soon came to realize that this didn't even matter because they had instructed me to show up at the wrong campus. They had sent me to the STEM campus, even though the email I sent stated my interest in psychology, nursing, and education. Instead of a tour, we just talked to another admissions advisor, asked the same questions, and received pretty much the same answers. The rest of my time was spent with Felix. We really enjoyed Camden and went to a few anime stores, Chinatown, malls, and a lot of dates out to eat. It was a good taste of what it might be like to live in London and a good indication I'm finally in a healthier relationship. I returned to Wisconsin on August 13th. I took a very long nap afterwards. I didn't have much of summer left before I would start my senior year, so I took things pretty easy until school started. September was devoted to pre-research, mainly spent in therapy and exercising, but I also designed my proposal and researched more universities to apply to, as well as sensory processing disorder. This included a very short amount of time looking at Florida universities, which I knew was my backup plan if London didn't work out. I had no intention of going to Florida, and I knew I was going to make it to London no matter what, but Mom wanted me to at least look. For my research on sensory processing disorder, I started with a book recommended to me by my occupational therapist, Don Pieper, called Too Loud, Too Bright, Too Fast, Too Tight by Sharon Heller. It is one of the only books providing support for adults with sensory processing disorder, presenting information in a readable yet effective way, and suggesting ways to improve sensory issues. However, when my senior proposal meeting came along, the advisors suggested I focus more on self-improvement and activity-based learning than sit-down research, so I never finished the book. From there on out, I somewhat let my project conduct itself based on my current needs, interests, and areas that could use improvement. My research can be divided into two categories: self-improvement and preparation measures for college and life in the UK. My self-improvement part of the project was done through regular therapy, exercise, and making sure I got my medication sorted before I left. I also conducted research on areas of London, budgeting, diet limitations, to which university courses to apply, and how to make a personal statement for college applications. Because much of my research was activity-based, research and production actually overlapped. For example, part of learning about self-improvement involved reading and completing exercises in a life plan workbook and doing a sleep study. The therapy portion of my project can also be broken down into two types, one focused on overcoming trauma and one focused on managing sensory processing disorder. I I had started EMDR therapy on May 2nd, 2017 to help me process through my trauma. EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, is a type of therapy for patients with PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. It invokes previous traumatic memories and feelings, then uses coordinated horizontal lights, beeping noises, and hand vibrators to reprocess the situation. To be completely honest, I hated EMDR therapy. It was definitely effective, but it was so incredibly difficult to do. I am so thankful for the relief that EMDR has provided me, but each day I knew I had an appointment, I was plagued with the feeling of despair brought on by the knowledge I would have to relive everything over again. The way I felt after an appointment was indescribable. I would dissociate for sometimes up to hours afterwards and was left with a hollow feeling inside, silently crying and thinking about everything that had happened. It was tough work, but because of it, I don't have as many nightmares recurring or random panic attacks, and I have less emotion attached to the experience and the people. However, I still do startle very easily, and I do avoid potential triggers just in case. The other type of therapy I was in was occupational therapy for my sensory processing disorder. It was a kind of exposure therapy. My therapist identified issues I have and slowly exposed me to them more and more in an attempt to get me used to the disliked substance. For example, she would take a food I dislike and have me just lick it once a day for a week. Then we moved on to biting the item. She had my mom hold something with a scent I didn't like and brought the item closer to me until I wasn't able to stand the smell. She had me put a finger in a substance I didn't like, then a hand, then had me wiggle my fingers around. She also had recommended that I take a little time to do yoga every day. To me, occupational therapy was a million times easier than EMDR. I was a lot more willing to go to these appointments. To be completely honest, I'm not too sure it worked so well, but my mom claims it helped, so at least there's that. In addition to trying yoga, I also tried out various forms of exercise that could motivate me to keep at it. First, I did what I had done last year for fitness, played Pokemon Go outside for at least half an hour. This worked well until winter came and I couldn't really walk outside for extended periods of time. Then my mom took the initiative to sign me up for Curves, a non-intimidating women's gym that is, for the most part, filled with elderly women. This plan worked fine for about a month. I went maybe 20 times, but ended up gaining weight. To my knowledge, I hadn't been eating any more or less than before, so I really have no idea how it happened, but it was pretty discouraging. My final idea was Dance Dance Revolution, or Step Mania to be completely accurate. I bought a USB dance pad and an HDMI cable, hooked them up to my laptop and TV, and I was able to play virtually any song as if it were in a DDR game. This is currently what I've been doing for exercise. I also started meeting with a new psychiatrist to make sure my medications were all functioning well. She switched me to a birth control pill that would help control acne better, and switched my antidepressant from fluoxetine to sertraline. The birth control worked amazingly, however the antidepressant was a bit more tricky. I felt godly for the first month or so, but then was back to normal. We still do not exactly have my dosage sorted out yet. In fact, I was bumped up another 50 milligrams last week, but I still have a little more time before I leave for England. Getting good sleep affects so many other issues, and since I had trouble sleeping for so long, my parents and I got a sleep study scheduled for me to figure out what exactly was wrong with my sleeping habits. First, the doctor had me wear a fancy bracelet for 2 weeks prior to the test in order to measure activity levels, exposure to light, and sleep patterns. I then took the actual sleep test. For 24 hours near the end of March, I was in the Children's Hospital in Milwaukee having a PSG or polysomnogram and MSLT or multi-sleep latency test. The polysomnogram came first. They hooked me up to a ton of wires all over my body, multiple on my head, face, and legs, and put a device in my nose and on my finger, and had me wear 2 belts around my body. The purpose for all of these wires and devices was to measure things like movement, oxygen, and blood levels, and brain activity, in order to help diagnose me with various sleep disorders such as restless leg syndrome, sleep apnea, insomnia, or narcolepsy. I slept for 8 hours with all of these things attached to me, recording my every move. When I woke up next morning, they removed everything but the wires on my head in order to conduct the multiple sleep latency test. They gave me 15 minutes to fall asleep, then watched my sleeping patterns for another 15 minutes, then woke me up and had me take a 2-hour break. This process repeated 5 times, and when it was over, I was free to go home. The results for my test came back about a week ago, and I have borderline sleep apnea and narcolepsy. For this, they prescribed me trazodone. Hopefully I should see some improvement in my sleeping habits with this medication. For the part of my research concerning living in England, I studied things like how universities work, how to apply for university, how to get a visa, moving options, and how to write a college essay, various grants, loans, allowances, and other funding options, insurance, and banking. Logically, I decided that my first step would be to get into college first before I start focusing on everything else. UK colleges work a bit differently than other places. In the US, normally we choose a college and then decide on which major we want to pursue. In the UK, they choose a course which they want to apply and go to the college that provides the course. With a little research, I found out that all UK college applications are ran through an incredibly handy online program called UCAS. In addition to handling the application process, UCAS provides many other services and information to people looking to apply to colleges. Through UCAS, I started searching for courses I would be interested in by narrowing the location down to central London and searching for intriguing topics. I started my official application soon enough and recorded my choices as mental health nursing at Kingston University, psychosocial studies at Goldsmiths University, early years education at the University of West London, and child psychology and special education in early childhood, both at the University of East London. The application was fairly easy to fill out. My only real concern was the personal statement. A personal statement is an essay about why you're suited for the given courses you've applied to, no longer than 4,000 characters each. The personal statement is sent to each applied university along with your application. Oftentimes, personal statements and how you make yourself out to be in them are deciding factors as to whether or not you get into a college. I spent over 6 hours researching and writing my statement to make sure that it was the best work I could manage. My process for applying for universities is now done, as I accepted my offer for a place in University of East London's course for special education and early childhood just yesterday. My next step will be to apply for a student visa, which I can't really do for another 2 months, but I've been working on my application in the meantime. The application, again, is through an online program called Visa for UK, run by the UK government. The application itself has 6 areas of required information with around 75 base questions and potentially more, depending on how you answer. The application requests information such as name, contact info, passport information, arrival details, past travels, criminal activity, family members, and about your intended university. The fee for visa application is $400. After receiving a visa, my next step will be accommodation. My first choice of housing is to rent an apartment. I would not be bound by university rules, however, apartments can be very expensive. If I were to get an apartment, it would most likely have to be one of not very nice quality. And while it wouldn't be ideal, I certainly would not mind having to resort to this as long as the conditions were not unlivable. The other option would be university accommodation. The locations are on the river and are very nice looking. There are multiple options from which to choose. There are 2 villages, each with a bedroom and studio option, and 1 village that includes an option for an enhanced bedroom. This option would most likely be cheaper, but I would have to share a kitchen with other students. I would be bound to the university's conditions, so my boyfriend would not be able to stay with me. Considering my circumstances and my options, I think the best course of action would be to stay in university accommodation for at least 1 term while I get settled and employed at a part-time job. The cheapest way to move all my stuff to my eventual residence would cost about $4,500. This is why I have a job. After school and housing are settled, I have a better idea of actual expenses. It would be wise to look into what money I can get back or loan. After looking at various options, it appears I qualify for 3 different reimbursements. The first being tuition fee loans. The UK government allows up to $13,000 in loans, which covers most of the cost of college. The next is disabled student allowance, money for students with disabilities. Finally, my sensory, sleep, and mental health issues are good for something. They earn me about $2,500, and I don't need to repay it. The final way I can avoid going broke is through federal aid, money issued to international students to help cover the cost of the transition. The amount received from federal aid varies based on one's circumstances, but I could get up to $20,000. Let's pray. The last step to complete my transition would be to switch over all the current U.S. accounts, my bank account, insurance, and my mobile network. These things can't really be done until other steps have been completed first, though, so I didn't really bother to look into the specifics yet. Therefore, my research will continue even after graduation. My main product combines both my self-improvement and college preparation work in one practical item that I will be able to utilize in the future, a household binder. It contains all of my information that I will need to be mentally and physically healthy, attend college, and live on my own in a foreign country. I will continue to add to it as I continue the final steps in preparation to move, as well as update it through the coming years. My biggest challenge for this project, as well as this entire academic year in general, has been my motivation. I was doing pretty great for the first few months. However, I hit a horrible dry spell in winter. I more or less gave up on everything. I barely did any work, I didn't bother to write out logs, spent all my free time sleeping. Things like cooking, eating, attending work and school, caring for myself became near impossible for me. Even things like using the internet, drawing, talking to friends, playing video games, genuine hobbies of mine, became too much of a bother. Just this month, I began to bounce back. I've been doing much better recently, but I still definitely lack any form of energy. I will continue to keep working and improving myself mentally, and hopefully soon enough, I will be feeling better than I've ever been. I've learned a lot about myself, what I want, and how to cope, manage, and plan. Despite the fact that this project was for the most part successful, it definitely did not go as expected. I had expected to get everything laid out and ready to go before summer, but this is not the case. I eventually came to learn that a lot of steps for applying for visas, getting accommodation, enrolling for school, etc. have strict timelines outside of senior project deadlines, and the time for most of these things would not come until summer. I had also expected to come onto this project for the most part cured, but of course that did not happen. Looking at my progress though, how far I've come from the antisocial, judgmental, cripplingly anxious, suicidal, negative, despondent, worthless feeling person I had become 5 years ago, I would say I'm doing pretty well. I have learned from my mistakes and taken extensive time to educate myself on who I am, my behavior, my personality, my values, my actions, my goals, setting myself straight through self-realization in order to avoid falling back into the pit I dug myself out of. I come to believe that interpersonal skills are potentially one of the best assets a human could possess. Through knowing yourself, you can adjust everything in your life, from the way you view things, to the way you interact with others, the way you work and learn and grow. The path to self-improvement is self-realization, and through that, I can achieve all that I yearn for. That said, being the sappy, affectionate, and overly sentimental person I am, I would like to acknowledge and thank everyone for the support I've received towards my recovery. First of all, of course, my parents, for raising me into the person I am, and proactively supporting my recovery, for allowing me to attend therapy, become medicated, and listening to my pleas to leave the Kimberly School District. Next, of course, Ms. Kozlowski, for the unconditional acceptance and nourishment as one of her advisees, for guiding me and teaching me through 3 of the most important years of my life. Thank you to my best homie, Zach, the best dad and bro I could ever wish for listening to me, being there for me, laughing and talking with me when no one else would, for the 13 wonderful years we've spent as friends. Thank you to Wyatt, my beloved twink, for bringing me joy no matter how hard things got, for understanding me and sticking with me through it all. Thank you to the one and only Max Cobb for being the best desk partner I could have asked for when starting out at VNS, for including me and being the first person to really assimilate me into VNS culture. Thank you to Reagan for being virtually the best person to vent to ever, for listening to me, talking to me, and being there for me from near the start. Thank you, Josh, for being my ally, for standing up for me, protecting me, and sympathizing with me when I needed it most. Seriously, I may not have been here to give this speech without you. And last, but of course not least, thank you to Felix, for showing me that love doesn't have to hurt, for caring about me, taking the time to understand me, spend time with me, raise me up, and for who you are in general. I'd also like to thank everyone here who gave their time today to listen to my senior speech. Thank you. Questions? Jared?
So I realized too, your wife is in a lot of online dating, like a long distance relationship. How was that like for you?
The question is, what has online dating been like for me? My answer for that is that since I've been online dating since I was literally 10 years old, it's more or less just what I've been used to. I have had a couple of relationships where the person has been in my school, and of course that's better, but at this point I don't really care about online relationships. Like I'm just so used to it that it's just like no big deal for me at this point. Sim?
So obviously you decided to do this project. How does it feel to share all this personal information with us?
The question is how it feels to share all this information with us. Share all, oh my gosh, to share all this personal information with you. My answer to that is I purposefully included a lot of the story, the things I went through, because I thought it would help me process, and partly because I constantly feel anxious, I guess, that I'm like doing something wrong or that people just generally don't like me, and I kind of took this as an opportunity to say, hey, if I ever act weird, there's reasons behind that. I promise I'm not trying to be like this. So that was more or less the main reason. Will?
So you've sort of grown up engulfed in sort of internet culture and things like that, and this isn't necessarily 100% sort of aligned with the sort of topic, I guess, but would you say that as somebody who has a lot of experience with that, that it made you more sort of open to new ideas and it sort of enlightened you, or that it was increasingly more tribalistic in that it sort of turned you towards a lot of negative spaces and things like that?
The question was, growing up, being immersed in the internet, if it led me to be more open-minded or led me to be more closed-minded, I guess. I think it's a bit of both. I think for a while, especially when I was at Kimberly, I discriminated against people who had typical interests, things that had nothing to do with internet culture, things like sports, things on American television, anyone with those kind of interests I kind of looked down upon, because I was like, there's so much out there, why are you doing this? This is so stupid. But at the same time, I've definitely learned a lot from the internet that I would not have learned had I not been on the internet, and I do think it's made me grow as a person. Aiden?
What is your plan for after you get out of college?
The question was what my plan was after I get out of college. I am very much not sure. I'm not even sure about college at this point, to be honest. If I do stick with my boyfriend throughout university, he says he hates it in England, actually. So we might be moving back to America or somewhere else. I don't really care where I end up as long as it's not Wisconsin. As for career, profession, I'm not too sure. Psychologist, nurse, teacher, something like that. Something where I can help other people, probably. Wilson.
So obviously you're going to university in London, which isn't cheap by any means. You mentioned already some loans you're going to get, but I'm curious to know if you ever applied for any kinds of scholarships.
The question was if I applied to scholarships, and the answer is that the UK isn't really big on scholarships. There's not many over there actually. And the amount that I would be eligible to apply for being an international student, and that is pretty low. There could be a few scholarships that I'd be able to apply for, but not yet. I haven't been looking into that quite yet. Mom, I'm saying because you already had a question.
I want to know why you didn't thank your sister.
The question was why I didn't thank my sister. If you know my sister, that could be a pretty clear answer as to why I didn't thank her. But in actuality, part of it was the there's 4 pictures on top, 4 pictures on bottom. I'm not even joking. I didn't want to throw that balance off. And, I do really appreciate her being here, though. There were a few other people that I could have thanked. You know, people like Jesse, Brenda, Lydia, just other people who Jack, other people who I've talked to at school who have talked to me and made me feel comfortable and accepted here. Sophie?
How do you feel about leaving your therapist to move to a different country?
The question was how I feel about leaving my therapist to move to a different country. Well, I have 3, and my therapist for cognitive behavioral therapy, I actually haven't seen in a while, not in a couple of months, so I've already kind of moved on from that. My EMDR therapist, I mean, she was really only there for EMDR, and I'm done with EMDR. So I don't really have an issue moving on. And my occupational therapist, that was also really only there for occupational therapy, but I really did like her too. Oh, she retired. So there's that. So I think it'll be pretty easy moving on. If I need it though, I'll probably just find a new one over there or something. Miss Lukey.
Can you explain a little bit about how what the fine line is between the disorder of the hypersensitivity aspect? I'm sorry, I don't know the technical term yet.
It's like sensory processing disorder.
Okay, and just being ultra sensitive, and you know, I'm assuming like from within, how do you tell? Because you can only tell what you feel, and then how do you go about that process to determine?
The question was the line between just being sensitive to things and having sensory processing disorder. And oh my gosh, sorry. The answer is when it starts to complicate things, when you can't live your life anymore because of it. You know, I couldn't dress myself. Everything my mom put on me, I would scream and cry, I'd be late for school because I couldn't stand it. Food, I still, you know, all my friends know I only eat chicken tenders and pizza. Like there's a lot of foods that just being around me makes me want to throw up, makes me extremely anxious just to be around, makes me feel panicky. Certain smells, I have to plug my nose, I have to get away, shove Kleenex up my nose, something in order to stop it. So pretty much when it starts crossing the line from being just sensitive to it to unable to stand it, unable to live with it. Wilson.
Okay, so I'm actually answering this for Percival. Percival wrote this down for me to read to you. Question is, I came from Kimberly and I totally hated it. What was the biggest thing you hated about it? Was it classes mainly or peers?
The question was what I hated about Kimberly. The short answer is absolutely everything. There's not a single thing I liked about being there. The people, it was just crazy how undiverse it was. You know, all the people looked the same, act the same, had the same interest. You know, it was like it was like almost like a brainwashing thing. Like you went in as a normal child, you came out as someone with a ponytail and Nikes who played sports all the time, and that's like definitely not who I am. So I did not fit in very well there at all. The classes were okay, actually. Homework was fine for me. They didn't assign much homework because everyone was too busy doing sports, and you know, sports come first. Hence the multi-million-dollar sports complex he built a few years ago. I think that's about it, mainly about what I disliked about Kimberly. Generally just the mood and the atmosphere, it completely contrasts with my personality, who I am. I had to get out.
Okay, because you seem to hate Wisconsin so much, what's one thing you'll miss?
The question was one thing I'll actually miss from Wisconsin, and the answer is my friends. The people who I will leave behind to pursue my own dreams. I definitely regret to an extent. Just not, you know, there's so many people over here and just my boyfriend over there, which is why I'm hoping to come back, not exactly to Wisconsin, but still at least be in the area. So the people here, the ones I'm close to at least. Danny?
Whenever we play Kimberly in basketball, they always go to us.
Okay,
Another question.
Next question. Next actual question. Jesse? How many hours am I seeing your project? Right now it's about, after my presentation, all the practice, all that, it should be about 275, so hopefully by the end of, around my assessment time, it should be about 300. Sophie?
So, I guess I don't really understand, what do you really like hate about Wisconsin besides, is it just like the people in general? Or, like,
The question is what I hate about Wisconsin. It is the fact that there are just things constantly thrown in my face 24/7. Like I can't like walk for 2 minutes or, you know, go anywhere, you know, without seeing like the Packers logo. You know, there's gold and green everywhere, you know. There's beer, there's bars everywhere. It's just the same stuff. It's so repetitive. And yeah, cheese. Cheese and cows and farms. And it's like, it's everywhere. There's no escaping it. You know, there's nowhere in Wisconsin you can go. There's no way to avoid it.
You'll never get any better
And it's just, I'm so sick of it. In general, a lot of people, they just seem so aggressive. They just love to pick fights, and you know, they'll murder a person over football. It's just a game. It's just a game. Sophie.
So follow-up question then, kind of statement question, combination. It seems to me that everywhere has their thing that they're crazy about, that they like, every state has their team that they're crazy about, and they have this like one thing specific to their state. So, I don't know, I feel like there is that aspect everywhere. So why do you think it's specifically the state that you don't like, or just America in general?
Okay, the question was, considering the fact that most states have something that they're like obsessive over, do I really hate Wisconsin or America in general? And my answer is most likely Wisconsin. I am aware that other states have things that they obsess over. I think my main issue with Wisconsin is that it's particularly stuff I don't like. Like, I never really understood the point of sports, you know, why people got so wound up over just a game. So I think trying to get away from that is what I want, and if I go somewhere, you know, that's, I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example of somewhere else that's like obsessed with something. Like Florida and oranges, sure. Like, I'd be okay with oranges. Allison?
And this goes off of Sophie's comment, but I think, from my understanding and hearing your speech, I think it's more so an environmental factor where this is a space that all of her trauma has been stirred up in, and therefore she associates the state and these symbols as part of a reminder to previous trauma, which is why she's identifying Wisconsin items and commonalities that our state represents as a negative influence in her mind. So I think just to better help you explain, if I am correct,
Yeah.
I think that's more so what she was getting at.
Okay. Allison's quick comment was pointing out the possibility that the reason why I am so strongly opposed to things like Wisconsin, why I don't understand sports, why I hate the Packers and all of this, is that I have been in Wisconsin for my whole life, including the duration of my trauma, and that I've been seeing these symbols everywhere all the time, even when I was going through my trauma. Even if it's unrelated, it was everywhere, and that I'm probably just associating those symbols with negativity and the things I went through, and it's holding me back from being happy. I definitely do think that's probably a possibility, and it's definitely at least part of what could be going on. Jesse? The question was my favorite place in England. Definitely Camden. London is known for being rich, upper class, full of wealthy people, aristocrats, politicians. Camden is a place north of central London where all of the weirdos rejoice. Everyone there is accepted. There's like goth, emo, punk culture everywhere, alternative, people into music, people into nerd culture, TV, anime, video games, all of that kind of blends together into one huge town or borough that is Camden. So I love being there. I love the distinct culture and all the unique things that you can experience. Carissa?
Did you ever do a project on like London, or do you wish you did?
The question was if I ever did a project on London. My family project, it wasn't really supposed to be my family project, but my June 2016 trip to London, my first time, I did count that as a family project. I guess technically, I didn't really do any research, I just kind of went there. But other than that, I did not really do any projects on London, and I don't really regret that. I didn't do many projects, 6-week projects in general here, because I just found, just the time frame and all the work and the stress and how quickly things went. It just wasn't really suited to how I would work and how I would succeed. So I only did a handful of 6-week projects, and London was not one of those. And it doesn't really matter to me. Hannah?
So you said for like a couple of years, was it? When you were like the majority of the time you were on Tumblr, you went through that whole SJW phase, and you said you were kind of annoying.
Yes.
Like, what would you say to somebody who would be currently like in a deep throw of that phase?
Okay. The question was what I would say to someone who is currently in their social justice warrior phase. I would say that although, as if I'm speaking to the person, I would say probably something like, although I realize that you're trying to stand up for what you think is right, you're trying to stand up for people who need the support the most, and I know that you're only trying to help things, make things better, but the way you're doing it, it comes across as just plain mean to other people. It's not the right way to do things. Like what you think you may be, you may not be. Things like identity and labels, it doesn't matter as much as it may seem, and the sooner you let go of your labels, things things that make you so discriminative and hateful towards other people, the sooner you let go of that, the sooner you'll be happier. And I would also throw in a comment about how I've went through that because, or else they might not believe me, which, I don't know. It's just, I think hearing the success story would probably help a lot, so.
I think that's a good one to end on.
Yeah.
Nice comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Xana. Let's head to advisories.
Oh, boy.